Hello everyone, so today I'll be talking about upgrade options for the Asus Z97-Pro motherboard. So I have an Asus Z97-Pro motherboard, and I made a lot of upgrades to this computer since late 2014. That's when I got my computer, or put together my computer with the Asus Z97-Pro motherboard. And you could do a number of upgrades to this computer to still make this computer relevant today. So let's start. So the first thing you could do is you could upgrade the RAM, but before that, here's basically what you have on the motherboard, and this is a layout of the motherboard, like the ports on the motherboard. So this computer has 8 SATA ports, and all the SATA ports are located around this part of the motherboard where it's highlighted in orange. You have 2 here, 2 ports, 2 ports, 2 ports, and 2 ports here, so 8 ports altogether. And I think there's SATA 3 ports, basically. And you have one M.2 slot, which is located here. And you have 4 DDR3 slots, which are highlighted in the light blue right there. 4 slots. You have 3 PCIe X16 slots, highlighted in the blue. 1, 2, and 3. And you have 4 PCIe slots, X1 slots, which are highlighted by the green here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You have you could put 4 chassis fans, 4-pin fans on this motherboard, and they're highlighted in the light or aqua color right here. 1, you could put 1 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So those are, you could use those ports to upgrade your computer. And as for the CPU, the most powerful CPU you can put in this computer is the i7-4790K processor. It's a socket 1150 processor. I have that processor on my computer. So when I first got this computer, that's the CPU that I put in there back in late 2014. So now let's talk about the RAM options. The maximum amount of RAM that is supported with this chipset is 32 gigabytes. So you can put 4 8 gigabyte DIMM modules in these 4 RAM slots. So any DDR3 DIMM modules will work, but Corsair XMS PC 12800 are recommended for this system. XMP is you can have XMP in this computer with faster RAM, like I think it's called G-Skill Ripjaw memory. I have that on my computer, and I did use XMP for a while, but I stopped because it was pretty unstable. The computer would crash from time to time, so I stopped using it, and I just reverted back to just standard timing, which was 99924. And I set the frequency at 1600 megahertz, so at PC 12,800 frequencies, which is 1600 megahertz. But XMP does work on this motherboard. It will make your computer a little faster, but it makes it just slightly more unstable. That's the only drawback of it. So if you want performance at all costs, I guess you could use faster RAM and use XMP. You could use PC 19200 RAM if you want, and have XMP enabled. But let's digress about that. So you could use Corsair Vengeance 8GB PC 12800 DIMM modules, or you could use Corsair XM S3 8GB PC 10600 DIMM modules. This is a 1333 megahertz frequency, and this is 1600 megahertz frequency, and this is Corsair XMS 8GB PC 12800 1600 megahertz DIMM modules. You could use these as well. And like I said, 32 gigabytes is the maximum, but if you have a budget and you can't afford it, you could still put out only 4 gigabyte DIMM modules in this and have 16 gigabytes. Or you could mix it. You could have 2 4s and 2 8s, or 24 gigabytes, or any combination of that sort would work basically. And as for the NVMe upgrade options, you could put one NVMe M.2 SSD in this computer. So you could put it right here. This is where the M.2 NVMe slot is. You could use a M.2 NVMe 2280 based SSD in there. So most of the SSDs are 2280 NVMe SSDs like this, like these right here. And basically that's denoted right here by the screw holes right here. So the 2280 is the longest M.2 NVMe that you can get for this computer, and that basically holds the most amount of memory. For me, I got a Western Digital N550 500 gigabyte SSD, but you could buy a larger one like a Samsung 970 EVO plus 2 terabyte M.2 NVMe SSD if you want. The larger the capacity of the SSD, the longer it would last basically. SSDs have auto wear leveling technology, so they could be written, and they could be written about maybe I think 1,000 to 1,500 times or something before you can't write to it anymore. That's the limitations of NAND memory. You can't write to it an unlimited amount of times. It degrades over time. It degrades over use. But for reading, that's not a problem. There's no wear when you're reading it. You know, when you're reading to a SSD. And one of the advantages of using a NVMe drive is that it's very fast. And you could also add a heatsink fan to a M.2 NVMe. And one of the drawbacks of using an NVMe SSD is that it's going to use up the bandwidth of 2 PCIe X16 slots. So it's going to use the bandwidth of, you have 3 slots here, PCIe X16s slots. So you could put your video card in here and it will use up the bandwidth of 2 slots. So you can't add a SLI video card configuration if you use an M.2 NVMe. So that's one of the drawbacks of using the slot. For me, it doesn't matter because I just use one video card, so that's fine with me, no problem. And I added this thing here. And one of the problems of using a heatsink is that if the NVMe was located too close to the PCIe X16 slot, then you're gonna have a problem putting in the video card. But for this thing, you're not gonna have a problem because it's located in a good position where you're not gonna have any obstructions. So that's a good thing about it. You could put any type of heatsink fan. It could be very tall, it doesn't matter, as long as your case can support it. As long as the depth of your case isn't too shallow, it shouldn't be a problem, or narrow. So you could add any type of M.2 NVMe, but one of the drawbacks is you're not going to get the full bandwidth of probably the best M.2 NVMe because of the fact that this motherboard is kind of old. So the most bandwidth I got out of my M.2 NVMe was about 850 megabytes per second. That's 0.85 gigabytes per second. So but it's still faster than the 2.5 inch SSD. So that's one of the good stuff about it. And it boots up very quickly. And I made a video about the heatsink, this particular model of heatsink, and also a video about M.2 NVMe Western Digital N550 500 gigabyte SSD as well. I'll leave that in the video descriptions and also in the end screen as well if you're interested. So next one, so as for the SATA device upgrade options, like I said, you could put 8 SATA devices in this motherboard, as long as you have a big enough case that could support it. So I have a Corsair C70 case, this case right here, and the color of my case is it's black. It's a black case. This is olive military color green case. But the case of the color for my case is black, but it's the same case like the one that you see here, and it has 6 slots for 5.25 inch hard drives. And if I wanted to use up all the slots and add another hard drive, I could if I wanted to, because one of the slots that is being used for the optical drive. So right now I have about, let me see how many drives I have on this computer. So this is the exact computer that I'm using. This is for the M.2 NVMe. This is for the SATA slots. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 slots are being occupied basically. But I could add 2 more hard drives if I wanted to. That's not going to be a problem. But I would probably have to add a 5.25 inch to 3.5 inch bay adapter if I wanted to add a additional 3.5 inch hard drive. That's the only thing. But you could put a lot of hard drives in this thing if you wanted. if you get this Bay adapter, you could put two 2.5-inch SSDs in here, and I made a video about this particular adapter as well. I'll leave that in the video descriptions and in the end screen, or the cards if you want to see it. And basically you could add a lot of hard drives in here, and you could put whatever configuration that you want in here. You could put you could use all 3.5-inch hard drives, like this Western Digital 3 terabyte hard drive if you wanted to, and you would have a lot of space if you did that. If you wanted to add 7 of these, then it would give you you'd have a total of 21 terabytes of space, plus the M.2 drive, whatever the size of that is. Or if you want to add a Samsung Evo 861 terabyte, you could add like 2 in this one slot, and you could add the rest. You could add a regular hard drive, you know, and do whatever configuration you want. So it depends on you, and it depends on the type of case that you have. And most computer systems that use this motherboard, I would probably assume already that they probably have full tower cases, like the case that is illustrated here. And as for the video card or GPU options, you could pretty much put any type of GPU or a graphics card in this computer. It doesn't matter. You could put GeForce RTX 3080 in there if you want, as long as you have a good enough power supply to support it. So for me, I have a EVGA 850 watt PSU, which I bought in late 2014 when I put together this computer. So I put in a pretty good power supply. I think this is the one that I have is a gold. It's 80 plus gold, so I put in one of the better power supplies. So power supplies, they basically have different ratings. You have 80 plus bronze, you have 80 plus silver, you have 80 plus gold, you have 80 plus platinum. 80 plus platinum is the best, and you're going to pay a lot more money for it. It probably has the best capacitors in there, so it's going to last a very long time. Gold is pretty good as well, but if you're on a budget, I guess 80 plus bronze would be okay as well. Those are pretty good. And the type of power supplies that I recommend are EVGA power supplies. From my experience, these power supplies are good. Antec power supplies are good as well. I use either Antec or EVGA for power supplies, and I'll put everything in the video descriptions below if you want to upgrade the power supply. But for the GPU, you could put any GPU in there, and it's not going to be a problem. Even the latest GPU, since this motherboard has a UEFI BIOS, it should be able to support it without a problem. So the problem is with graphics cards is that if you have a legacy BIOS, then the type of graphics card you can put in there is quite limited, because you're not going to put anything better than a GeForce GTX 1000 series, like a GeForce GTX 1060, GeForce GTX 1070, or a GeForce GTX 1080. So you're not limited because it doesn't have a legacy BIOS. It's got the most modern BIOS, one of the more modern BIOSes, which is a UEFI, so that's good. So if you used up the M.2 NVMe slot, you will not be able to add SLI or two or more graphics cards to your computer, because the bandwidth of two PCI Express X16 slots will be used, so you won't be able to basically add SLI on your motherboard or computer. So if you're not using an M.2 NVMe slot, then you could put two graphics cards in here and it shouldn't be a problem, and use SLI, as long as you have a good enough power supply which can support it. And like I said, for the CPU, the maximum you can put in here is the i7-4790K, but I'm probably assuming that most people who bought this motherboard didn't put anything less than an i7-4790 based processor in here, whether that be a i7-4790 or a i7-4790K processor in here. So the people who bought this high-end motherboard probably didn't cheap out on CPUs, you know. So basically, that's the end of this video, and those are. Oh yes, another thing. If you want to add additional stuff in these PCIe X1 slots, you can, like different types of controllers if you want. If you want to add a better Wi-Fi in here, you could add a better Wi-Fi card in here, but this motherboard already comes with a pretty good Wi-Fi setup, so you probably don't need to do that. But you can add stuff in these ports, these PCIe X1 ports, if you want. Like you could add a game capture card as well if you wanted to in one of these slots. That's also an option, but that's up to you. So anyways, thanks for watching. By Ace 1000KS 1975 signing out.